Chapter 2 of Connor's unique take on the history of the Philippines. So, we learned in the first part, Ferdinand Magellan was down around Cebu and that general area in 1525, and in fact celebrated the first Catholic Mass there before he met his untimely demise in a war against Lapu-Lapu, the chief of Cebu, and all of his soldiers. They hightailed it out of there not long afterwards, the remainders, and didn't actually successfully colonize the Philippines for another 44 years. The problem was that they were going about it arseways. So the Spanish would approach the Philippines via Mexico and Peru, and then a crossover ending up eventually in or around Leyte and Cebu. And then even worse than that, their return journey was back through choppy waters, which would take even twice as long. So it wasn't until 1565, years and years later, 44 years later, that a guy by the name of Legazpi, Legazpi, he figured out, lads, hold on, you just head up here a little bit to the 38th parallel, then wait for the northwestern winds, right? That'll take you back down around towards the coast of California, and from there it's a hop, skip and a jump back to Mexico, which is where they had to go before they'd make their way back to Spain. So 1565, Legazpi rocks up to Manila and kicks the shit out of the Sultan of Brunei, who was there up until that point. He didn't put up much of a fight. There was a Chinese pirate by the name of Limahong. He did put up a bit of a fight. 7,000 men, in fact. But Legazpi still managed to beat those forces. And Limahong went back to be executed eventually by the Ming Emperor somewhere in 1570 or thereabouts, right? In or around the 1600s, Spain was far too interested in the rich American territories. They didn't have the resources to apply to that trans-Pacific route. Also, they were fighting the Ottomans in the Mediterranean, so they didn't have enough resources. Basically, they were pure shit at Asian trade compared to the Portuguese, then later the Dutch and also the English. For the Portuguese, conversion to Christianity was only secondary to development of trade. But Imperial Spain saw no obvious trade possibilities in the Philippines. So from the get-go, Spain saw the Philippines as an opportunity to acquire territory and heathen souls to be brought into the one true faith. Conquest mostly proved to be relatively easy, but was far from complete, and that barely touched Mindanao and Sulu, which was full of what the Spanish called Moros or Muslim. These Moros or Muslims, all the way up until 1635, carried out large-scale raids focusing on seizing captives and then bringing them back to Mindanao for sale. Spanish officials had very limited resource for governing the territory, so because Madrid was a year away, wrestling with its even bigger acquisitions in the Americas and with war in Europe imminent, it didn't have enough money to manage the Philippines and its new territory there. Spain had no option but to turn to two very different agents for its rule, the military and civilian and the clerical. So the military-civilian rule followed the example set out in American territories, known as the encomiendas. The encomiendas. Basically, they would hire local Spanish mercenaries to carry out, to set up and to maintain certain territories and rule with an iron fist. The encomenderos were given the right to tax the people and demand labour in return for providing law, order and justice. So it's pure obvious that this wasn't going to work out from the get-go. The clerical arm of the conquerors were the friars, of which there were 4 orders: the Augustine, the Dominican, the Franciscan and the Recollects. Local populations who had been living a quite peaceful life up to that point suddenly found themselves in slavery. populations in settled areas which had never needed stone buildings or galleon-sized ships were dragooned into cutting stone, building churches and providing labour for the friars. The church built some magnificent, massive Baroque stone churches, which mostly withstood the island's frequent earthquakes, but the human cost was high. The state demanded the cutting of forests and the building and repair of huge ships needed for the Trans-Pacific trade. Each galleon, which is a big massive ship, was 45 to 55 metres long, and it needed about 2,000 trees. The boat building skills, which so impressed the Spanish, became a huge burden on the natives.